on this week's episode of Forever I Do.
So I went to see her. I was working on Duke Street, right? And she was on Todd Street. I went to see her at the law office, and I was just smitten by her at the same time I saw her. And then I was trying to concentrate on insurance, but I couldn't do that. So I kept on going back, and the people at my office said, "Boy, Keith, are you trying to get the sailor, trying to get the woman?"
Plus, we talk wedding concierge services with Shikima Hinds of Island Bride. This is Forever I Do. Keith and Rosemarie were destined to be together. It's the kind of love that makes it through any kind of weather.
Well, it's an interesting story because I was given her name. I was an insurance agent, and I was given her name on a bit of paper by Kevin Bailey, who was intending to be an insurance agent, but something happened, and he wasn't able to become one. And he gave me his list of, I think, maybe 25 names. And the day he gave them to me, I lost it. He wasn't able to become one. And he gave me his list of, I think, maybe 25 names. And the day he gave them to me, I lost it. So I went back to him to say, "Boy, Kevin, you know, I lost the list now. You can't remember the names." I said, "Boy, I can't remember the names, but I tell you what, I give you 5 that I can remember." So he wrote 5. And then I took it, and 2 days later I just couldn't find the 5. So I was kind of embarrassed. I said, "Boy, I have to go back to Kevin." So I went back to him and said, "Kevin, I mean, this is really an embarrassing situation. Well, you know, I can't find the list. I can't remember. I can't find it." So I said, "Boy, Keith, it's the second, it's the third time. And I really don't remember what 5 I gave you, but I'm going to give you 2 names that I can't remember." And he wrote down Rose's name and another name. And so I went to see her. I was working on Duke Street, right? And she was on Todd Street. I went to see her at the law office, and I was just smitten by her at the same time I saw her. And then I was trying to concentrate on insurance, but I couldn't do that. So I kept on going back, and the people at my office said, "Boy, Keith, are you trying to get the sailor, trying to get the woman?" I said, "Boy, I really not too concerned about the sailor right now." You know? Anyway, long story short, I mean, eventually I sold her the policy, but I sold her myself as well.
Because he really wanted me to buy the policy, and I kept saying, "I don't want no insurance." And then he was, you were going back and forth. I think you had made an appointment with my secretary at the time. Right. And so my secretary came and said to me, "Mrs. Ellis?" No, I was Miss Duncan at the time. I said, "Boy, Miss Duncan, I find a man for you." I said, "Listen to me now." I said, "I don't know about that." But anyway, this man wants to sell your insurance, but you need to go and buy the insurance policy. I said, "Okay." That's I'm totally cynical. Anyway, and then he came, and then we were back and forth trying to buy this policy. I didn't buy a policy for a very long time. And then I kept saying, "I don't want a policy, man." And then he said he was interested. And then I said, "Oh, so you're going on like it, okay, you want to buy the policy."
But she kept going around, because even though I wrote the policy and submitted, you know, I wrote the contract and submitted it, but she refused to do the medical.
That's true.
So I was there for, like about a month trying to get her to do the medical until my manager at the time said, you know, Keith, I believe what you have is a China egg. You know? It won't hatch. But, you know.
Wow.
First date. Okay. I think the first date is that we went to Harborview Drive-In. It's about Steve Beaker, but it's another name, but that's what we went to see. You know what I mean? I can't remember much. I don't think I watched much of the show that night.
Honestly, I don't remember any of it at all. The truth is that Keith is an amazing communicator. That's also true. And oh my, and so if you get him, if you just get in a room with him, you just end up being engaged in some kind of conversation. And I think because we were just now getting to know each other, we spent the entire time chatting and forget to watch even their movie because there was just so much we wanted to know about each other. And we come out and say we're going to buy food at the tuck shop, and we spend half of what the place at the people tuck shop buying food. And I think it's really what it's all about. If you cannot engage in a conversation for a very long time and not become bored, then that's okay. If you find that you're getting bored, you have a problem.
What mattered to me was that she was loved by my family, because you know when you're married to somebody, there is not just two persons coming together, but two families coming together, and unless you have that synergy, then it becomes a problem. And she was able to bridge that gap. You know what I mean? I'm from the country; she's from Kingston, and kind of a different background. But she was able. My family just loved her. The first moment they met her, they were thinking, "Whoa, boy, you're lucky."
And the thing is, you know, with him, his mom at that time, I was running an office in Mandeville, right? Because I was a legal aid clinic, and so I was running their Mandeville office, and we went to Mandeville twice a week. His mom lives in Mandeville. So every time I'm going down, Rose, you can go by Mommy, please, and do X, and do Y, and do Z. So every single time I go to Mandeville, even if he didn't ask me, I would just say, let me go by and go check Ida. And so we end up establishing a relationship outside of even the two of us, you know. So Ida and I used to go and chat for hours when I go to Mandeville. If I come down, she'd come down and meet me at the office, and then we go back up at the house. And so we end up establishing a relationship outside of even the two of us, you know. So Ida and I used to go and chat for hours when I go to Mandeville. If I come down, she'd come down and meet me at the office, and then we go back up at the house. And so the truth is that we established a relationship, his mom and I, even outside of Keith, because he didn't have to say to me, go Mandeville, I'm going to go to check Ida if I go to Mandeville. Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of, when you can establish that type of relationship.
With her as well. That's understandable.
The truth is that I think from the first time, he often says it, but the truth is to be told, the first time he came into my office to sell me insurance, I was immediately struck by him. I think is a personality that is, very, very, very cordial kind of personality. So therefore, his personality automatically, I was also attracted to that kind of personality. I'm not a rough person, so I don't do well with characters that are abrasive, and he wasn't. So therefore, from the first time I saw him, I thought, this might be interesting, you know. But I think as we got to know each other, and I'm from a family that is very very protective, very opinionated, and therefore, if I brought somebody home that my mother didn't like, she just pass. She not even talking to say hello, you know. She just pass on the veranda, see the gentleman, says good evening. The person responds, and when I go inside, he says to me, I don't like him. Don't bother with that one. And I'm dead serious. And in my family, if my mom says no, that's it. You just don't understand me. If my mom don't like you, we're not going any further. From the first day I take home key, mommy liked him. And what was worse, he's into poetry, and my father is a poetry addict. So therefore my father is into reading Shakespeare and all this kind of stuff. And that is exactly what he's into. So they would spend hours. It's like I go check either by myself. He would come and just sit down with daddy for hours. I come home from work. I said, "We doing in my house. What is this?"
The thing that you have to, if you're interested in a lady, you have to make sure you win the parents as well. You know what I mean? And then what I did, just shortly after we met, we met in March, the 24th of March, and then shortly after that was Gilbert, because it was 1988, and Gilbert was in...
Yes, that's right, September.
September. So what I did, I said, boy, got the whole, there's no electricity and so on.
Lots of roof and
So I heard that there was ice on Old Harbour Road.
Ice
factory at the Old Harbour Road, Spanish roundabout there. So I think, but all the roads are blocked and so on. So boy, I'm gonna have to find this. Like I have to score big. So I jump in my car, and I drive through some place. I was driving here today. I mean, road block and all kinds of places. I went to Old Harbour and got 50 pounds of ice and took it back in my car and took it to Kingston and chipped it up and then had ice. So my future mother-in-law and father-in-law, they had the ice. I said, boy, Keith, where you going to get this ice? All the way in Old Harbour. So once I had that, I said, when I started looking at the face, I know, yeah, mom. The ice. The proposal was after the business of us deciding to get married, because she never knew my father. My father lives in Canada. My mother lives here, and my mother lived abroad at the time. So, but she was back and forth. And I was going to New York, and she decided to come to New York or go to New York. We were going to go to Canada because I was going to take her to see my father in Canada. And then she decided, let's just when we got to New York, she was going to buy the wedding dress.
Well, we couldn't at that time. We can't afford to be flying back and forth. So I said, we're done in New York. I might as well buy the dress.
But I never proposed. You know what I mean? But
to my mother's total horror, by the way.
So but when you know it's right, it's right, and you know what I mean. So before, so it means that she bought the wedding dress before I proposed, and we bought the ring at that time and everything. So it's a kind of a
backward thing.
Yeah, it was almost like you said, well, so this is a
foregone conclusion.
All right, I think so.
But you had to leave.
But afterwards,
you had to leave.
We had that formal kind of thing at her home on her veranda with her family and some of my family, and I had to kneel down.
But of course.
And I had to go and talk to her father to ask him for her hand in marriage and sing. And your father, the kind of, as I say, the man is into poetry and stuff like that, so he's into theatrics and things. So we sat there. I sat there with her mom and dad.
And I'm in my bedroom, right? Now, if you know my house, this is the living room, and then there's a door here, and right behind this door is my bedroom. So behind the door is me. All of us. So not behind the door, waiting to hear what daddy going to tell him. So we all sat behind the door, and he's busy proposing. He's busy telling daddy of his plans.
So I'm telling him that, Mr. Duncan, I've been coming here, and I'm in love with your daughter, and I want to ask you for a hand in marriage. I want to be proper, a good, well brought up guy from St. Mary. And he says, serious, Suppose I said no.
But, of course, at that point, the whole of it in the back, stress out. Oh God!
But I was just, but then he smiled and I said, oh yes, man. I mean, and her mom. Well, she liked me from that. I knew that all along.
I think he just turned up. I don't know. I don't remember you doing much about it, but it was really that particular year, we had four persons in my church got married right behind one another, literally. So the first person married was a friend of mine named Jackie. And so I planned Jackie, and then Jackie planned mine, and then we planned Sylvester, and then Sylvester. So it was, but the wedding, I come from a very large family. So when we do the first list, by the time we done right, my family, we done gone 80 already, right? And we don't talk about nobody from Keith Ellis. But the wedding was nice. I think in all we had was about 150 guests, because he also has a large family and very close. So everybody had to be invited, everybody had to come. But we had it at University Chapel, which was always my dream. And I always dreamt of the videotaping of it being from above down. I always wanted that, so I got that at University Chapel. And then the wedding went longer than expected. So we were supposed to have gone to Hope Gardens for pictures, but of course the wedding takes so long. And then, because we had a period of just worship, because we are Christians, everybody wanted a period of worship. And so we had that during the wedding. And then, after the wedding done, by the time you meet these 150 people and take family this and family that, it was just going too long. So my sister comes and says, Rose, you did the pictures right here, so right there. So all of our pictures have been in the gardens of University Chapel, which are beautiful.
Still to come.
Never you marry somebody who can't be your friend. Because when you don't have no emotion and think, you must be able to sit down and just chat and laugh and give trouble, and you must be able to laugh at yourself. You must be able to, when him do striptease, I must can tease me, I must can laugh and don't think he gonna be upset. You know what I mean?
But first, to pull off your luxury wedding, you need the right concierge service. We talk Wedding Coordination 101 with Shikima Hinds.
The first and the most important thing that I recommend is that they need to get a sense of what they want. What are their wish lists, all the things that they envision and the most important factors for them in their wedding. Once they do that, the budget. They need to know how much they're willing to spend. I'm also very cognizant of the fact that for most of them, it's their first time getting married. So a wedding couple doesn't usually know what to allot or what is involved in an entire wedding planning process. So they usually need guidance in the early stages to help them to determine what their budget is, see if it's practical, and sometimes their wishes and their budgets don't merge. So one of the jobs and things that I have to do is to help them to find that balance. Mm-hmm. The first question I ask is, tell me what you envision your wedding to be like. And I just let them talk and say everything. What do you want to eat? What kind of vibe? You know, these days a lot of couples want a party atmosphere, the type of food, the look and feel, the experience that they want to have themselves and what they want their guests to experience. Once I let them pretty much reel off everything, I take my notes, and then the things that they haven't mentioned, then I go through the process and ask them about different elements: hair, makeup, the venue, look and feel, and so that I can guide them to create the vision that they have in their mind. There are different types of brides. There are those brides that know exactly what they want, and they're very particular about what they want, and it must be done this way, in this time, and they're gonna cross all the T's and dot the I's. And then you have another type of bride that she may have seen with the age of social media, Pinterest and Instagram, and she's unclear, she gets confused about what she wants, and it's difficult to decide for the look and feel, and then she tends to change her mind, change her look. She sees this week and this is what my wedding is like, but she sees something else that she likes. So it's the job of reining them in and containing the vision and taking the bits and pieces of everything that she may have seen and heard, and help to cap that to ensure that the different elements encompassed in her vision on her wedding day. a coordinator really should represent the bride and groom, and with years of experience and industry knowledge, they're able to guide you on things that will help you to save money, help you to things that you need to look for with different wedding professionals. And they can take away a lot of the running up and down. They negotiate on your behalf. They ensure that the execution of the wedding goes seamlessly. There's a lot of different services that a coordinator can offer. So let me just say this. You have the full wedding coordination, where we assist you with everything from the ground up. Finding the venue, all the different vendors. I'm very keen on working with the professionals that the bride and groom chooses to work with, and not necessarily only ones that I would recommend. There's also a day of service, because you have couples and brides that are very integral and they want to enjoy the whole planning process themselves, but they need somebody on the day of to see that everything that they've planned and everything they've coordinated for the past few months are put in place and executed as per what they expect. And I also have a la carte service where, okay, you want to do half of the wedding planning process, but really and truly, you have like your consultation with your dressing. So I'm fine with the dress and I know where I'm going to get married, and Uncle George is going to do my pictures, but I need help with everything else. So I can customize the coordination service based on the elements that you actually want assistance with. The size of the wedding does not matter with the level of coordination that you get. I think what decides how the level of work that's involved is the level of detail that's involved in the wedding planning process. If you're having a small wedding, it's the same thing like having a big wedding. It's just that you have more people, so everything is on a grander scale. So the detail and the look and the feel of the wedding will still be as equally as important as if it's a large. And when you have somebody there to guide you through the process, it certainly does make everything easier. With me personally, I can pull it off at any time. That's how I feel. The average engagement period is anywhere from 6 months to a year and a half. So there are those who, because they don't know what the process is like, they have to start saving and budget, and if it's a lot of family or friends from overseas or it's an out of town wedding, they like to give time for everybody to be aware about the wedding, to put everything together, and those couples usually have a longer engagement period. I think one of the most, I wouldn't say challenging, but it was a unique request. Some years ago, I had to have a ceremony on the ocean, right? Where the couple wanted to get married in the sea. So there was a building of the deck out in the ocean. So that by far has been one of the most unique experiences. And then you have things where 3 days before we have a hurricane coming to the island and you have to scramble and make these changes. So in the wedding planning process, you have to pretty much just be prepared for any and everything. Island Bride is a full service wedding coordination company. We also offer destination wedding concierge assistance and business to business consultations for other wedding industry professionals. My website is islandbridejamaica.com. I'm on Instagram as Island Bride Jamaica and on Facebook as well. And they can contact me at 876-361-0910. Hi, I'm Shikima Hinds and you're watching Forever I Do.
Thanks, Shikima.
Hi,
Keith
and Rose,
and you are watching Forever I Do. What stands out in my mind immediately is our first child, Carrie Ann. She giving birth to Carrie Ann, and that was 2 years after we got married. But it was just amazing because I was able to be inside of the operating theater and to watch this new birth. I mean, I've never seen that before. And I mean, just to to see your child being born is it's just amazing. Really, it's hard to describe the kind of sensation you go through when you behold something like that. Life is wonderful.
On the day that Kerry was born, he coming home from the hospital met an accident.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a major accident. And so he was in bed for like about 6 months.
I was disabled for 8 months.
Yes, it was a very bad accident. And I remember I was in the hospital and my mom came in the morning and said to me, "No, you're supposed to be there 3 days, right?" My mom comes in the morning and says to me, "Rose, I have some bad news." Someone said, "What happened? He dead?" Because me can't figure know that bad.
Oh,
and she says to me, "No, but he had an accident." So I said, "Okay. But he's alive?" "Yes." I said to her, "Okay, I need to go home now." She says to me, "But Rose, you just had last night. You just had your child. No, you can't." I said, "Mommy, I have to go home now. I really have to do this." And she knows I'm stubborn. So he says, "Okay." So the doctor comes and the doctor says, "You're ready to discharge yourself." I said, "That's okay." I said, "I have enough medical people in my family. I'm good with that. But I need to get out because I have another matter to have to attend to." And I think for me, that sealed it for me because I suddenly realized that it was really important to me. The relationship I had with Keith was very, very important to me. And I realized at that moment that there wasn't anything more important than that right now. So therefore I came out of the hospital, came home with Carrie Ann. We got to help her the same day. And I was doing this back and forth thing, deal with Carrie Ann and deal with hospital. But it was never a chore because it was what I had to do. And it was important.
She had 2 babies looking after. In fact, I was in the hospital for 24 days. And so it was quite a period before I did a surgery. I mean, I did 2 surgeries. But while in the hospital at university, in the orthopedic ward, I mean, my mom or her mom would bring the baby to the window.
Yeah.
The baby couldn't come inside, and I would look through the window to see the baby, and that was something else for me too, because I was, my all of these are marks from the operation. My leg, my hip, my hand was terrible. But just to see the baby at the window was just.
So we actually have Duncan, who was born 10 years after Carrie Ann, which is just another story in itself. But Duncan was born 10 years after Carrie Ann, after a true joy to have as a child. I remember before Duncan was born, I always said, "Lord, please don't give me a problem child. I'm too old to have a problem child." And the Lord gave me a perfect child, a child that doesn't give problem, which is really great. But I think many times people don't realize how important it is for you to just be able to speak honestly with your partner. I think many times people get caught up in the emotion of the moment and they don't stop and understand that if it's going to be a long-term relationship, it cannot be how you feel right now. You have to look and see what are the faults, because everybody has faults. You have to look at what are the faults you see in your partner. And then when you are alone, my father used to say, in quietness and in confidence, free from emotion, you take decisions. And therefore, when you are alone, you have to sit back and say, okay, these are his faults. Can I live with them? You understand? Because you can't change it. You're not going to be able to change it. So the question is, can I live with it? And if you have determined that, yes, I can live with that, your relationship will work. And if you really like each other, never you marry somebody who can't be your friend. Because when you don't have no emotion and think, you must be able to sit down and just chat and laugh and give trouble, and you must be able to laugh at yourself. You must be able to, when him does trip me, I must can tease me, I must can laugh and don't think he's going to be upset. You know what I mean? So there has to be a kind of synergy that exists if it's going to work. Otherwise, you can have a very, very boring relationship. Even though you might be married for years, you know. Keith always says his greatest fear is that you have a marriage that lasts for years, but you're unhappy in the relationship. That's just a mess. So,
Yeah.
you know.
I'd say to men too that if you don't think the woman is a wonderful catch, don't marry her. Because apart from marrying your friend and all that kind of thing, which is wonderful, but men look for more than just friend. So she has to continue to be somebody that you look at and say, boy, I'm a lucky man. You have to. And not just how she looks, but there's something else. There's a soul connection. You have to find that and retain that. And you have to be able to talk to the person. The communication is absolutely essential because, you know, if you can't speak to each other, then you can't feel free to tell the person how you're feeling, and that is very important. The openness, and the other thing is a willingness to compromise. There are some things that you're not going to get, and if you insist upon it, or if your timing is wrong in asking for it, it creates a problem. So learn how to wait and how to compromise and how to adjust that which is important, and you make sometimes what you desire subservient to what she desires. And if you are able to do all of that and still think she's a wonderful catch, it will work.
Thank you so much, Keith and Rosemarie. Here's to many more years of happiness and wedded bliss. On the next episode of Forever I Do,
every relationship will get difficult sometimes, but I think that we are able to forgive each other and move on easy.
You can't go wrong playing a Crystal Gale. You know, you can't go wrong you playing, you know, your People Bryson and your Regina Bell. You know, songs like those are the go-to ones.
thanks for tuning in. See you next week. Makeup services by Nardine Makeup. Coordination and planning, Shikima Hinds of Island Bride, Jamaica. Set decor, Thai Flora Luxe. Forever I Do is filmed on location at the Jamaica Pegasus Hotel, your wedding destination in Kingston, Jamaica.